Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tyler Evans. Really glad to be here with you all. Thank you, Grace, for the introduction. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the state of Bitcoin, which is a lot to cover for 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to go fast, and we can walk through it a little bit. So just to kind of lay the groundwork here a little bit, and for what I'm going to talk about today, I'm really talking about this from a Western perspective. I'm based in the U.S., in Nashville, Tennessee. I just arrived in Hong Kong yesterday and have been deeply involved in the Bitcoin community in the U.S. really for the past decade. So my background is with a company called BTC Inc. My Bitcoin journey started when I was in university in 2013 when I bought my first Bitcoin. And after I did that, I went deep enough down the rabbit hole that I started a media company right out of college called BTC Media, which we've grown over the past decade to become the largest media company in the Bitcoin space. We publish Bitcoin Magazine. We host the Worldwide Bitcoin Conference Series, which was in Nashville last year, where we had candidate Donald Trump join us and lay the groundwork for his policy of what Bitcoin could look like in the U.S. We'll also be back in Hong Kong later this year in August for Bitcoin Hong Kong. So I would love to see all of you there. So my perspective is really coming from the Bitcoin community in the U.S. and specifically on the institutional front. That's where I spend all my time day to day, really as an investor these days, at our asset management arm, which is called UTXO Management, where we run a couple different funds focused on the Bitcoin ecosystem. One is a early stage venture fund where we've been very active in Bitcoin, DeFi, layer 2s, infrastructure. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of the emerging Bitcoin ecosystem. But then our flagship fund is actually a liquid fund where we focus again on Bitcoin, but really on derivatives, ETFs, listed companies, and the Bitcoin Treasury company strategy, which I'm going to talk a lot about. So let's get into it. Again, to cover what's next for Bitcoin in 15 minutes is a tough task, but I really want to frame this as 2024 was the year of the start of institutionalization of Bitcoin in the U.S. And then looking ahead, what's to come this year as the start of the nation state era for Bitcoin. So in 2024, just as a recap, we really kicked off, again, what I'm calling the institutional era of Bitcoin with the approval of the spot ETFs in Bitcoin. In the U.S., that's really what kind of laid the framework for institutional investors to access this asset class. We saw the launch of the ETFs being the most successful ETF products ever launched in history, with the BlackRock IBIT ETF setting the world record for asset growth to 10 billion to 50 billion. And we saw, the emergence of that really translate into a mega institutional bid for companies like MicroStrategy. And then that momentum ride into the election of the very first U.S. pro-Bitcoin president, Donald Trump. So as we look back at, the real catalyst for Bitcoin last year and what really drove this adoption on an institutional scale, you had the ETFs, again, as a landmark success, basically of all the ETFs that BlackRock has ever launched, the Bitcoin products being the fastest adopted, fastest growing in their history. But what we saw emerge was really the opportunity, and this is what we spent most of last year investing in out of our fund at UTXO Management, for the Bitcoin Treasury company or the Bitcoin Strategy company. And so this is a concept that Michael Saylor really pioneered in the U.S. And for those not familiar with the story, Saylor had been running MicroStrategy, a public company that he founded, for decades, but it was kind of low growth, kind of very stable enterprise software business. And he saw the opportunity to be really the world leader in adopting Bitcoin as a publicly listed company. And he took that plunge about 4 years ago when MicroStrategy was trading around a $1 billion market cap. He has grown that over 100x in the last 4 years, with MicroStrategy topping out at above 100 billion market cap, making it the best performing equity in the entire US market in 2024. And to zoom out a little bit, what these Bitcoin treasury companies really represent is a way to sell Bitcoin exposure into an institutional audience by repackaging and securitizing Bitcoin into forms that institutional investors are familiar and comfortable with. And so, the secret that Saylor really discovered was that there are massive pools of capital out there. Insurance companies, fixed income investors, convert ARB funds that have a mandate where they can only invest in that specific type of security. But all of those institutional investors want some access to Bitcoin as the best performing asset class of the last decade. And so what Michael Saylor really pioneered with Strategy was a way to repackage that Bitcoin exposure by putting it onto the balance sheet of a public listed company that then can issue securitized products like common equity, corporate bonds, preferred securities, convertible bonds, basically these securitized instruments that fit into the mandate and that these institutional allocators are comfortable with buying, that they understand, that can fit into their portfolio. And so that drives kind of the flywheel of BTC yield that enabled Strategy to scale up their balance sheet from a $1 billion market cap when they started this strategy to over 40 billion in Bitcoin that they hold today. And so, Saylor's really the expert here, kind of wrote the playbook. We saw an opportunity to globalize this strategy and take it into more markets worldwide. So we did that in Japan with a company called MetaPlanet, who I'm proudly repping here today. MetaPlanet was a Japanese hotel and hospitality company that followed Saylor's playbook and adopted the Bitcoin standard for their balance sheet just 12 months ago in April of 2024. In the span of 12 months, they were able to grow their market cap 100x through the power of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And MetaPlanet last year in 2024 was the best performing equity globally, out of 55,000 companies listed, over a $250 million market cap. In the US, we've also got GameStop looking to join the party. They're the company that just raised a $1.5 billion financing round with the intent to buy Bitcoin. So I'm hoping over this next week we get an announcement that they've joined the party. And finally, we're bringing this strategy to Hong Kong as well with a company called Moon Inc. That we acquired a controlling stake in just a couple months ago, and where we really see this being the gateway that's very complementary to the ETF products listed here in Hong Kong, but to bring Bitcoin exposure to more of the institutional investor landscape in Hong Kong, and hopefully someday into mainland China as well. The last thing I'll touch on just briefly here is, within the Bitcoin ecosystem, really through 2024, we saw the emergence of things like ordinals, runes, and BRC20 tokens on Bitcoin, showcasing, the opportunity to use Bitcoin not just as a store of value or not just as a payments layer, but actually to use it as the building block and infrastructure to build a true DeFi ecosystem. over the last year, we saw hundreds of millions of dollars of VC funding from firms like our own pour into companies that are building layer 2s, building DeFi, building Bitcoin native stablecoins, building all sorts of infrastructure for developers and users to explore new use cases on Bitcoin. This market is very early, but it's one that we're extremely bullish on at UTXO Management. And we think that a number of these companies, including a good number that are based in Hong Kong here, will be coming to market over the next 12, 24 months, and that this opportunity within the Bitcoin ecosystem really represents a catalyst to drive new waves of adoption, new types of users, and new economic activity onto the Bitcoin chain. All right, so that was 2024 at a very fast-paced recap. Let's look ahead a little bit to 2025, which I'm calling the start of the nation-state adoption era for Bitcoin. So I'd be remiss here not to just try to reiterate for the audience how monumental of a shift that we've seen on the regulatory side and really on the government attitude towards Bitcoin and crypto in the first couple months of the new Trump administration in the US. We were very grateful to host President Trump at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville last year. And he made a number of promises to the audience about what he would do for Bitcoin. Things like freeing Ross Ulbricht on day one of his presidency. Things like firing Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC. Ending the war on crypto. And he made a promise then to establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve. If we look back now, less than 100 days later, the Trump administration has followed through on all of these promises, and we've seen a complete 180-degree shift in terms of policy in the US, in terms of the regulatory environment, in terms of the clear guidelines and the permission for people to really innovate within crypto. And so, that I think represents the start of a new era for crypto and Bitcoin specifically in the US. And we're already starting to see a lot of projects pop up in the US, seek to re-enter the US market, and a lot more innovation that was previously driven out of the country by the uncertain regulatory environment returning home. With that, and with the establishment of the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, which was that executive order that Trump signed less than a month ago, he laid the groundwork for the U.S. to become, to put Bitcoin on par with gold in the eyes of this administration, where just like the U.S. has Fort Knox, where they store the gold owned by the central bank as a strategic reserve to undermine and provide stability for the currency. Similarly, President Trump pledged to establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve, not only to hold the Bitcoin that the U.S. has already acquired as a result of law enforcement cases, hacking, etc., but with a pledge to find new ways to acquire that Bitcoin. And so we're eagerly awaiting to hear when and how the U.S. Will start acquiring Bitcoin and at what pace. But my expectation is that within the end of the year, that the U.S. will begin being active in the market, seeking to grow that Bitcoin reserve. And the U.S. isn't the only one moving. We know China's a large Bitcoin holder. We've got Bhutan growing their state-sponsored Bitcoin mining operations. And also Mubadala, the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi, disclosing last quarter a massive Bitcoin position owned by the government of Abu Dhabi. So I'm running out of time here. But what I wanted to leave you guys with, leave the audience with, is where is Hong Kong and where is China's opportunity to join the B7, to join the nation states that are forming this new world economic order powered by Bitcoin, especially in this era of uncertainty where the rules of international trade and cooperation are being rewritten as we very much speak, where Bitcoin represents a new opportunity for hope, a new financial infrastructure, and the framework for global cooperation. So with that, I'm out of time. Thank you very much. I hope that was helpful.